Let's get started learning about arrays by opening our AutoCAD. Again, if we go down to the window icon in the lower left-hand corner, and when the pop-up comes up, we select AutoCAD 2020. Once yours opens, it should look similar to mine. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to go to the big red A or the application menu, and we need to select New. This will bring up our templates. The template we are going to use is AutoCAD.dwt. Again, our template has nothing in it. Templates are used to contain predefined items and elements. Things like layers already being created, line types being loaded, text styles, dimension styles, blocks. There are lots of elements that can already be preloaded into your template. Again, a template file ends with .dwt and an AutoCAD file ends in .dwg. So we are going to say open. The first thing I want to do is go down here and turn off my grid. The second thing I want to do is I want to make sure my dynamic input is off. So I'm going to start typing in DYN, D-Y-N, and it should bring up DYN MODE, which is DYN mode. If I click on that, I want to make sure this has a 0 in it. Mine does, so I'm going to hit enter. If yours doesn't, change that to be 0. Dynamic input makes it difficult for people who are first learning AutoCAD. Once you become an experienced user, then you can start using dynamic input if you would like. The next thing we need to do is to save our file. So again, we're going to go back to the big red A or the application menu, and we're going to do save as. Again, you are going to save things into your OneDrive, and I will tell you how to name your file and the folder to create to place it in. For today, I'm just going to use my test drawing and say save, and it wants me to tell it whether I want to replace it, and I'm going to say yes. So now the next thing that I need to do is my units. I can get to my units by going to drawing utilities in units, or I can just type in units in the command line. Right here are the two areas that I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with the unit type and the unit precision. Again, I will tell you most cases what type to use, whether it's decimal or architectural. I will also tell you the precision. I'm going to leave this as the default, and I'm going to say OK. The next thing I want to do is go back to the application menu, and I want to do options, and I want to go to open and save, and I want to make sure that my automatic save has a check mark in it and that it is set for 5. The other item that I usually like to make sure that I have set in this options box is under display, and that is my crosshair size. And again, I like to have it set to 100. It just makes my screen a little easier to follow. So I'm going to say apply and say OK. The last thing that we just recently learned was to add layers. So I'm going to click on the layer properties box, and I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to call this my object layer, and I'm going to set it to be green. And then I'm going to create another layer called hidden, and I'm going to set it to be red. And I'm going to create one more layer called center, and I'm going to set it to be yellow. On my hidden layer and my center layer, I need a different line type. So if I click on hidden, it brings up my line type box. I'm going to go into load, and I'm going to scroll down and find hidden and add that. While I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and load my center line too, because I know that I'm going to need it. So I'm going to pick center. Since I'm on my hidden layer, I want to be sure to pick the hidden line type, and I'm going to say OK. And then I can go to my center and pick center and say OK. The last thing I need to do is fill out my descriptions. So for my object layer, I'm going to put object lines. For my hidden layer, I'm going to put hidden lines. For my center layer, I'm going to put center lines. And I'm going to set my current layer to my object layer. At this point, I believe I am ready to start drawing. Before I start drawing, I want to go ahead and hit save one more time just to make sure that everything is saved at this point. Now we are ready to start learning about arrays. We are going to start with the rectangular array. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm just going to pick a starting point, and I'm going to put at 4, 4. That way it will be 4 units by 4 units. So I have an object drawn. Again, right up here on your modify toolbar is the array command. If I click on that, you see I have rectangular array, path array, and polar array. If I click on rectangular array, you see it takes me down to my command line, and I have to start answering questions down here. And it will walk me through all of that. And that's okay once you become an experienced user. But if I type in array classic, and if I start typing it in, it should pop up. You see it's going to give me a graphic box. I'm a very visual person, so this is very helpful to me. You'll notice that up here we have a rectangular array and we have a polar array. So we're going to talk about the rectangular array. So if we look here, we have this button selected. The next thing is we need to select the objects that we want to be in our array. So once I click on that, it takes me back into my drawing, and I'm going to select my rectangle and hit enter. Now you'll notice I can tell it how many columns and how many rows that I want. If you look at the diagram over here, it will show you an example of what's in here. It has 4 shown as a row and 4 shown as columns. If I change my rows to 5, you'll see my picture changed. Now if I'm drawing with circles or some kind of other shape, it's still just going to show me rectangles, but at least it's giving me a description of what I am trying to draw. The next thing you'll see is we have offset, distance, and direction. So in my row, which my rows are the ones that run horizontally, I need to tell it how far do I want these to be offset. When I'm figuring out my spacing, I have to take into consideration the dimension of my object. So if I'm doing my rows and I look at my object from the bottom to the top, I made it 4. Let's say I want to have a 2-unit spacing between it and the next one. So I have to take the dimension of the object itself plus 2 to make sure that it starts right here on my row. So in this case, my row is going to be 6. Then let's say for my columns, I actually want them to have a space of 3 between them. So in that case, I'm going to use my 4 plus 3, which is going to be 7. Once I get this done, before I accept it, I have an opportunity to do a preview to make sure it is how I want it to be. So I'm going to click on preview, and you can see that I have, between my rows, I have 2 units, and between my columns I have 3. It's a little bit wider spacing. So let's say I want them to both be 2 and not be 2 and 3. If I hit my escape key, it's going to take me back to my array. So I'm going to change this to be 6 so I have the same spacing all the way around. Again, I want to do a preview. That looks better. Everything is spaced equally. So now I can just hit enter and accept it. The rectangle array is pretty self-explanatory, and again, it's very helpful to have the graphic box versus the written commands. The next one we're going to look at is the polar array.